Hey guys, welcome back. If you're just joining us, find a comfortable spot, dim the lights, maybe get under the covers. Tonight, we're not telling a story of kings and queens, of battles or betrayals. No, we're dialing it way, way back. We're going to spend some time along, quiet, uneventful, timing, the company of a medieval scribe, a man whose entire world was the space between his desk, his inkpot, and the slowly turning pages of a manuscript. His name, for the sake of this story, is Brother Cuthbert, though, to be honest, he wouldn't mind if you forgot it. He was never one for the spotlight. His legacy was meant to be anonymous, his labor absorbed into the silent, collective memory of the monastery. So, let's begin not with a bang, but with a stretch, a slow, groggy awakening in a small, stone cell. The air is cool and smells faintly of damp stone and the old, sweet rushes scattered on the floor. It's still dark outside, the kind of dark that feels like a heavy blanket. The bell for matins has just finished ringing, its echoes fading into the pre-dawn stillness like a stone sinking into a deep pond. Cuthbert has slept, but not deeply. The straw in his pallet isn't what you'd call luxurious, but it's a bed. He sits up, the rough wool of his habits scratching against his skin in a familiar, almost comforting way. He swings his feet onto the cold stone floor, and the day, as it always does, begins. There's no rushing. There is only the slow, deliberate sequence of events. He walks to the refectory for a simple meal. Maybe it's a piece of coarse bread, a sip of weak ale. He doesn't taste it. Not really. It's fuel. His mind is already drifting towards the Scriptorium, towards the one thing that gives his life a sense of purpose, or at the very least, a sense of routine. After the meal, he makes his way there. The corridor is long, lit by the occasional flickering torch, casting dancing shadows that he pays no mind to. He's walked this path 1,000 times. His footsteps are soft, almost soundless on the worn stone. He pushes open the heavy wooden door to the Scriptorium. The room is silent, but not entirely. It's a silence filled with small, soft sounds. The rustle of a parchment page being carefully turned, the faint, rhythmic scratch of a quill from a few desks down, the soft sigh of a brother concentrating. The air is still and carries the distinct, slightly animal scent of parchment, mixed with the earthy smell of inks and pigments. Light is beginning to filter through the high, narrow windows, cutting through the dust motes that float and swirl in the air like tiny, lazy galaxies. Cuthbert walks to his own carrel, his personal space. It's a simple wooden desk, angled to catch the light. On it sits an unfinished page, a few quills, a knife, and some pots for ink. This is his kingdom, a kingdom of quiet diligence. His first task, and one he approaches with a kind of solemn ritual, is to prepare his pen. He picks up a goose feather, a primary flight feather, which he acquired from the monastery's flock. It's been dried and hardened, but it's not yet a writing instrument. It's just a feather. He picks up his penknife. This is a small, sharp knife, its only purpose this exact moment. He holds the feather, feeling its slight curve. He then begins to carefully shave away the barbs from the lower part of the shaft. The calamus. He does this slowly, methodically, creating a smooth, clean surface for his fingers to grip. The tiny, feathery bits float down to the desk, like a very local, very minor snowstorm. Now, for the important part, the nib. He has to cut the end of the quill at just the right angle. Too steep, and the point will be too rigid and scratch the parchment. Too shallow, and it will be too flimsy and blot. He makes a single, clean, diagonal slice, then another, smaller one, to create a slit up the center of the nib. This slit will help channel the ink down to the point in a controlled flow. He tests the point gently against his thumbnail. It needs to be sharp, but not asterisk to asterisk sharp. It's a delicate balance. He makes another microscopic adjustment, and then another. This process could take, well, it takes as long as it takes. There are no deadlines in the Scriptorium, only the sun's journey across the sky. With the quill prepared, it's time for the ink. Of course, he could just use the common black ink the monastery makes in large batches, from oak galls and iron salts. But today, he needs red, a specific, vermilion red, for an initial capital letter. This requires a special mixture. He takes a small piece of cinnabar, a heavy, reddish mineral, and places it on his grinding slabber. Small, flat piece of porphyry. With a glass muller, he begins to grind it. This is not a fast process. It's a circular, repetitive motion. Around and around, the coarse grains, slowly, reluctantly, yield under the pressure, becoming a finer and finer powder. The sound is a soft, gritty whisper, around and around. After what feels like an age, the cinnabar is a fine, brilliant red dust. He carefully tips it into a small seashell he uses as a paint cup. Now, the binding agent, he cracks a single, small egg, discarding the yolk and white. He's only interested in the glare, the egg white. He whips it slightly with a sliver of wood, just enough to break it up, and then lets it settle. He carefully pours a few drops of the clear glare onto the red powder. Now, he mixes. With a delicate touch, he combines the liquid and the powder, creating a smooth, thick paste. The color is vibrant, almost shockingly so against the dull gray of the shell. He dips the very tip of his newly cut quill into the mixture. It's ready. He turns his attention to the parchment. It's a page from a psalter, the text already ruled with faint lines. He's copied most of the page in a neat, black textura script. Now, at the top, there is a space left for a large, ornate, Dei Dominus. It will begin. The Lord. He takes a breath, steadying his hand. The only sound now is the faint, rhythmic scratch of his quill. He's not drawing the letter yet. First, he's making the faintest of outlines, a ghost of the shape to come. The quill whispers across the surface of the parchment, which is slightly rough, textured from the animal skin it once was. He feels every tiny fiber, every imperfection. This is the most focused part of his day. The world outside the scriptorium, the birds singing, the wind in the trees, the distant sounds of work from the farm, it all just fades away. There is only the line, the slow, deliberate, painstaking creation of a curve that will, eventually, be a letter, in a word, in a prayer, in a book that might outlive him by centuries. Not that he thinks about that, he's just thinking about the curve. His hand begins to ache, a low, dull throb in the muscles between his thumb and forefinger. It's a familiar feeling. He pauses, placing the quill down carefully on a rest. He flexes his hand, slowly, opening and closing his fingers. He looks at the parchment. The outline is done. It's a simple, clean shape. Now, he must fill it in. This is the truly meditative part. There is no thought, only action. Dip the quill in the red shell. Tap it gently on the side to remove the excess. Bring it to the parchment. A slow, steady stroke, filling the outline with color. The ink flows smoothly, thanks to his perfect nib and his perfectly prepared pigment. It's a small victory. He continues, stroke by stroke, filling the empty space with brilliant red. The letter D begins to take form, a solid, crimson shape emerging from the sea of black text. It's not exciting, it's not meant to be. It's just progress, the slow, inexorable progress of a single man, on a single day, adding a single spot of color to the vast, dark canvas of history. And for now, for Brother Cuthbert, that is more than enough. The red D is complete, a solid, crimson shape, a small island of vibrant color in a vast, dry sea of black text. Brother Cuthbert places the red-stained quill aside on a special tile reserved for such colorful work. He looks at the letter for a long moment. It is acceptable. The lines are straight, the curves are even. It will serve its purpose, which is to mark a beginning, to guide the eye. It is not a work of great art, not one of those fantastical illuminated letters that twist into dragons and jesters, consuming the margins of more luxurious books. No, this is a utilitarian beauty, and with that thought, which is as close to pride as he ever gets, he moves on. The main text awaits, the black ink. This is the workhorse of his existence. He reaches for a different pot, a small ceramic jar containing the common black ink. This ink is not a rare pigment. It was made in a large batch months ago by one of the older brothers, a practical man with stained, permanent fingerprints. It's a concoction of oak galls, iron salts, and gum arabic. It smells metallic, like old nails and rain. He gives the pot a slow, deliberate stir with a clean stick. The ink is thick, glossy. It coats the stick and drips back into the jar in a slow, syrupy stream. Satisfied, he picks up his primary quill, the one reserved for this black work. He dips the nib. The ink clings to it, a dark droplet hanging precariously. He brings it to the parchment, to the next blank line ruled in faint lead. The text he is copying is from the Book of Psalms. He's copied this particular psalm before, probably several times. The words are as familiar to him as the feel of his own rosary beads. Asterisk, Baitus ver quae nan, abiet, in concilio, impi orum, ... Asterisk, blessed is the man who walks not in the counsel of the wicked. His hand begins to move. Its a motion so practiced it is almost unconscious. The quill touches the parchment. Asterisk, scratch. Asterisk, it moves to the right, forming the strong, vertical shaft of the B. Asterisk, scratch. A pause as he lifts the quill, repositions it for the first curve of the E. Asterisk, scratch. Asterisk, this is the rhythm of his life. The soft, persistent scratching, like a very patient mouse gnawing on the edge of eternity. He forms each letter with meticulous care. The texture of script demands it. Every letter is composed of separate, sharp, angular strokes. It's not a flowing hand. It's a constructed one. It's as if the words are being built, brick by black brick, upon the page. He does not read for meaning. He reads for form. His eye sees a word on the exemplar of the original manuscript he is copying from Mand. His hand reproduces it. His mind is free to wander. It wanders to the lunch he will have later. He hopes it's pottage, the one with the leeks. His mind wanders to a slight ache in his lower back, a permanent resident from years of hunching over this desk. It wanders to the sound of a fly buzzing lazily against one of the high windows, a sound that comes and goes with the breeze. The words flow from his eye, down his arm, through his hand, and onto the page, but they do not pass through the part of his brain that understands them. Asterisk, et. In via peccatorum, nan stetit, ... asterisk, and stands not in the way of sinners, ... The letters form, the line of text grows, one deliberate angular character at a time. His focus is so absolute on the shape of the letters that a mistake, when it happens, is a small, quiet catastrophe. It's on the word peccatorum, the second C. His quill catches on a slightly rough patch of parchment, a tiny flaw in the skin. The line judders, and a small, ugly blob of ink mars the perfect downstroke. He stops immediately. He doesn't sigh. He doesn't curse. He simply sets his quill down. The flaw is addressed with the same calm method as everything else. He picks up his knife, not the pen knife, but a smaller, finer blade. Gently, with the very tip, he scrapes at the parchment. He scrapes away the tiny, offending fiber that caused the blot, and then he carefully scrapes away the dried ink itself. It comes away as a fine, black dust. He blows on the spot, a soft, breathless puff of air, and the dust vanishes. The patch is now slightly rougher, slightly lighter than the surrounding area, but the mistake is gone. It is a tiny, almost invisible scar on the page. Only he will ever know it was there. He takes his quill and redraws the line, perfectly this time. Crisis averted. The great drama of the Scriptorium has reached its climax and resolution. The morning wears on. The sunbeam that was once a narrow sliver on the far wall has now widened into a bright pool on the floor. The dust motes dance with renewed energy in the light. Cuthbert's world has shrunk to the few square inches of parchment in front of him. The slow, deliberate formation of letters is a kind of meditation. A T is crossed, an I is dotted, with a tiny, precise stab of the quill. The ascenders of letters like B and D and L reach up tall and straight, like bare winter trees against the sky of the page. The descenders of P and Q swing down below the line with a graceful, final curve. He is building a forest of text, a dense, impenetrable thicket of devotion. His hand aches again, a deeper ache now. The muscles are tired. The skin on the side of his middle finger, where the quill rests, is becoming red and calloused. He pauses. He flexes his fingers, stretching them out, then making a fist. He looks at his work. He has completed maybe 15-20 lines. It is good progress. The page is slowly, inexorably being conquered by ink. He thinks, vaguely, that he might finish this page by Vespers. It is a modest goal, an achievable one. And in the timeless quiet of the Scriptorium, where the only measure of progress is the slow filling of a page, it is a goal as grand as any king's ambition to conquer a kingdom. For now, Brother Cuthbert's kingdom is this page, and he is winning, one slow, scratchy, black letter at a time. The fly has stopped buzzing. The only sound left is the gentle, rhythmic scratching of his quill, a sound so soft and persistent it could almost be the sound of time itself, wearing away. The bell for the midday office rings. its sound a dull, resonant bronze wave that washes through the stone corridors and into the Scriptorium. The scratching stops, all at once. The silence that follows is suddenly profound, a vacuum left by the cessation of a dozen tiny, scratching sounds. Brother Cuthbert lays his quill down with the finality. He slowly straightens his back, and a series of small, muffled pops echo along his spine, a personal, anatomical response to the monastery bell. The ache in his hand is a deep, settled thing now, a companion that will stay with him for the rest of the day. He stands, and the world outside his carrel seems to swim back into focus. He becomes aware of the other scribes, also rising, also stretching in their own silent, personal rituals. One brother rolls his shoulders, another flexes his fingers, wincing slightly. They are a fellowship of shared aches. They do not speak. There is no need. Their shared labor is their conversation. They file out of the Scriptorium, their soft-soled shoes whispering against the stone floor, and make their way to the church for the office of sext. The prayers are recited. The chants are sung, but for Cuthbert, the words are a blur. His mind is still half entranced by the rhythm of the script, the shapes of the letters floating behind his eyelids. The prayer is a task, much like the copying. It is performed with precision, but the soul, for a moment, is resting. After the service comes the main meal of the day in the refectory. It is, as expected, pottage, a thick, steaming gruel of grains and vegetables. Today, it does have leeks. This is a small, quiet victory. He eats slowly, methodically, his mind beginning to quiet. The refectory is not silenter. Rule is relaxed during meals, but the talk is low, murmurous about the weather, the state of the abbey's vegetable garden. A visiting monk from a sister house. Cuthbert does not contribute. He listens, and the mundane chatter is a bomb. It contains no perfect curves, no sharp angles, no potential for blots. It is wonderfully, comfortably imperfect. Returning to the Scriptorium feels like returning home after a long journey. The air is still. The light has shifted. The bright, aggressive pool of sunlight from the morning has softened, diffused, and crawled further along the wall. The dust motes seem to dance with less urgency. He settles back into his carrel. The unfinished page awaits. It looks different now, after the break. The lines of text he had poured so much effort into that morning seem suddenly small, a little pathetic. The vast blankness below them seems to mock him. This is the hardest part of the day. The resumption. His black ink has developed a slight skin, a membrane formed on its surface from exposure to the air. He takes his stirring stick and breaks it, swirling it gently until the consistency is smooth again. His primary quill feels different in his hand. The point has worn down slightly from the morning's work. It's lost its perfect sharpness. It's become blunter, more familiar. It's no longer a pristine tool, but a partner, worn to the shape of his grip. He doesn't recut it, not yet. He will use it until it truly fails him. There is a certain respect in using a tool until it can be used no more. He dips the worn quill. The ink clings a little more sluggishly than before. He brings it to the page. Asterisk scratch. Asterisk. The sound is different. Slightly rougher, less a whisper, more a muted grate. He begins again. Asterisk. Et folium. Ias non deflu. Et ... Asterisk. And its leaf shall not wither. He copies the words, his hand moving with a slight stiffness from the break. The first few letters are awkward, a musician fumbling for the notes after an intermission, but slowly, the rhythm returns. The muscle memory takes over. The world shrinks once more to the point of the quill. The afternoon is the true test of a scribe's patience. The novelty of the day is gone. The end is not yet in sight. This is the long, flat stretch of the journey. His mind wanders more freely, more deeply. He isn't just thinking of leeks anymore. He thinks of the sheep in the field, wondering if the one with the crooked ear is still there. He thinks of the winter coming, and whether the stores of firewood for the Scriptorium are sufficient. He thinks, for a fleeting, almost forbidden moment, of the world outside the monastery walls. A world he hasn't seen in 20 years. A world of noise and dirt and imperfection. He wonders what it smells like. Then his eye catches a slight imperfection in his exemplar. A faint stain in the margin of the ancient book he is copying, and his mind snaps back to the task. The here and now. The only reality that matters. The line, the curve, the next word. His body speaks to him in a language of minor complaints. The ache in his back is a low, constant drone. The callus on his finger feels hot. A slight throb has begun in his right temple, a tightness from the unbroken concentration. He ignores them. These sensations are part of the work, as much as the parchment and the ink. They are the price of adding one more page to the great, silent library of faith. He presses on. The stack of finished pages to his left grows slowly, imperceptibly, a geological accumulation of effort. The stack of blank pages to his right diminishes at the same glacial pace. He does not think of the entire book. He thinks only of the next letter. Always the next letter. The sun continues its slow arc, and the shadow in the room deepens, turning from a sharp, defined shape into a soft, general gloom. The day is aging, and so is Brother Cuthbert, but the page is being filled, and for now, in the quiet ache of the afternoon, that is enough. The light in the Scriptorium has changed. The sharp, defining beams of afternoon have softened into a diffuse golden haze that fills the room like a liquid. It no longer illuminates. It merely tints. The dust motes, once energetic dancers, now seem to float with a heavy lethargy, as if ready to settle for the night. Brother Cuthbert's world, which had shrunk to the point of his quill, now expands slightly to accommodate the growing darkness. He does not light a candle. Not yet. The rule is strict about open flames near the precious manuscripts. He will work until he can no longer distinguish the fine hairlines of his letters, and not a moment longer. His work has changed its character. The meticulous, angular texture of the main text is complete for this page. Now, he is adding the rubrics, the short instructions or titles in red ink that guide the reader. Asterisk, hic incipit, salmus penitentialis. Asterisk, he writes. Here begins the penitential psalm. This is lighter work, in both color and effort. The letters can be a little less formal, a little more rapid. He uses the red ink he prepared so carefully this morning, now slightly thicker, having sat in its shell all day. It requires a slightly different pressure, a slightly more fluid touch, to get it to flow from the worn nib. He manages. He always manages. There is a deep fatigue settled in him now, a weariness that feels less like an affliction and more like a natural state of being. It is the fatigue of a day spent in silent, intense concentration. It is a heavy cloak he wears. His movements are even slower, more deliberate, as if he is moving through water. When he dips his quill, he holds it over the inkpot for a moment longer than necessary, watching the droplet form a tiny perfect sphere of black or red, capturing the dim golden light of the room for a fleeting instant before it is absorbed into the thirst of the parchment. He becomes aware of the sounds of the monastery settling in for the evening, a distant door closing with a soft, wooden thud, the faint, rhythmic chopping of wood for the evening fires, the call of one brother to another, too far away to make out the words. Just a murmur of human sound that underscores the immense quiet of his own space. These sounds do not distract him. They are the punctuation marks in the long run-on sentence of his day. Finally, he reaches the last line, the final verse of the psalm. Et omnes qui in eo sunt, asterisk, and all who dwell therein. He forms the last word, the final S with its graceful, trailing curve. He places the final punctuation mark, a simple point, a full stop. He lays the quill down. He does not pick it up again. For a long moment, he simply sits, his hands resting on the edge of the desk. He looks at the page. It is complete. A full page of text, from the bold, red D at the top, to the final, black point at the bottom. The journey he began in the cold pre-dawn is now over. There is no great sense of triumph. There is only a quiet, hollowed-out satisfaction. It is done. The ritual of conclusion begins. He carefully, tenderly, cleans his quills. He wipes the red ink from the first one with a damp cloth, watching the brilliant pigment stain the rough linen. He cleans the nib of his black quill, removing the accumulated residue of a day's labor. He sets them aside to dry. He seals the ink pots, pressing waxed cloth over their tops to keep the air out. He tidies his carrel, aligning the exemplar with the edge of the desk, placing his knife just so. The finished page is set aside on a special shelf where the parchment will be allowed to rest, the ink to cure fully before being bound. He stands. His body protests with a symphony of aches. His back, his neck, his hand, his eyes all voice their complaints in a dull chorus. He stretches, a long, slow, full-body stretch that makes his joints creak. He blows out the single, small lamp that had been lit at the next carol, plunging his workspace into deeper shadow. As he walks towards the door, The scriptorium is almost entirely dark, filled with the deep, velvety blue of twilight. The desks are empty, the pages sleeping. The only remnant of the day's industry is the faint, metallic scent of ink that hangs in the still air. He pushes the heavy door open and steps out into the corridor. The air is cooler here, moving. Somewhere, the bell for Vespers begins to ring, its tone deeper and more solemn than the morning bell. It is not a call to work, but a call to rest, to reflection. Brother Cuthbert walks towards the sound, his footsteps slow and measured on the cold stone. He does not think of the page he completed, nor of the one he will begin tomorrow. He thinks only of the prayer, of the meal, and then of the deep, dreamless sleep that awaits him in his small, dark cell. The fly, he notes absently, has found its way out. The scriptorium is silent once more, a silence waiting to be broken, tomorrow, by the soft, patient scratching of a quill. The transition from the scriptorium to the choir stalls for Vespers is a shift not just of location, but of being. For hours, Brother Cuthbert's primary output has been the silent, visual language of ink on parchment. Now, he must engage in an auditory one. The cold of the stone church seeps through the soles of his shoes. A different cold from the scriptorium, wider, more echoing, touched by the breath of the large empty spaces above. He finds his place in the stall, the wood worn smooth by generations of elbows and the pressure of countless leaning bodies. The ache in his back settles into a new position, a familiar discomfort in a new locale. The chant begins. The first note hangs in the air, a single, pure tone that seems to cleanse the mind of the day's visual clutter. Cuthbert opens his mouth and adds his own voice to the chorus. It is a dry, rasping sound at first, unused since the morning office. But as the psalm progresses, it smooths out, becoming part of the collective stream of sound. The words are the same words he has been copying, but now they are lived, not drawn. Asterisk, dirigator, oratio, mi sicut, incensum, inconspectu, tuo ... Asterisk, let my prayer be directed as incense in thy sight. He feels the vibration in his chest, a physical sensation that replaces the mental focus of the quill. His mind, for so long a silent engine of transcription, is now a passive receptacle, allowing the ancient melodies and words to wash through him. This is not work, this is absorption. After Vespers comes supper, a silent affair in the refectory. As a reader's voice drones a passage from a saint's life from the pulpit, Cuthbert eats his portion of bread and cheese. He drinks his cup of watered wine. His hand, as he lifts the cup, trembles with a fine, almost invisible fatigue. The muscles, so precisely controlled for the delicate work of writing, now protest this simpler task. He eats slowly, his mind pleasantly blank, listening to the words of the reader without truly hearing them. The day is draining from him, like ink from a lifted quill. The final office of the day is planned, the night prayer. This is the shortest of the offices, and the most intimate. The church is darker now, lit by only a few lamps, whose light seems only to deepen the pools of shadow in the corners. The prayers are softer, more somber. Visita, quaesums, domini habitationum, iestem ... Asterisk visit. We beg, O Lord, this dwelling. The words are a plea for protection through the unknown dangers of the night. For Brother Cuthbert, the dangers are not demons or bandits, but the lingering tightness in his shoulders, the phantom itch of the quill on his finger, the shapes of letters that still float behind his eyes. The prayer is a blanket, a soft, woolen blanket of sound, meant to smother the embers of the day's labors. The blessing is given. The monks begin to file out, a slow, shadowy procession. The walk to the dormitory is the last journey of the day. The air in the long dormitory room is cool and still, smelling of clean straw and the faint sweet scent of sleeping men. Each brother has his own cell, a small, partitioned space containing a pallet, a stool, and a peg for his habit. There is no privacy, only the illusion of it. Cuthbert enters his cell. The ritual of undressing is simple, functional. He removes his leather belt, the habit, and his shoes. The rough wool of his undertunic is soft from countless washings. He kneels by his pallet for a moment of private prayer, but the words are formless, a weary sigh directed towards heaven. His body is demanding its due. He lies down on the straw pallet. The feeling is one of immense, almost overwhelming relief. The pressure is off his spine, his feet, his hand. He pulls the single, coarse wool blanket over himself. The weight of it is comforting, a physical assurance of rest. He can feel every individual strand of straw through the thin mattress, each one a tiny, pointed reminder of the world's hardness. But tonight, it does not bother him. He lies in the darkness, listening. He hears the rustling of the brother in the next cell settling down, a muffled cough from across the room, the sound of slow, even breathing beginning all around him. The great, final silence of the monastery is descending. His last conscious thought is not of psalms, or ink, or the perfection of a line. It is a sensory memory from the day, the smell of the red ink, a mix of earthy cinnabar and the faint, sharp scent of egg white. It is a pleasant smell, a productive smell. And with that simple, meaningless impression in his mind, Brother Cuthbert surrenders to the silence. The day is done. The quill is still in the dark, his hand curled slightly as if still holding it, finally begins to relax. And so, the night passes. The moon traces its own silent arc across the sky, a colder, more distant cousin to the sun that rules Brother Cuthbert's day. In the dormitory, the silence is broken only by the rustle of straw as a sleeper turns, or the soft, rhythmic sound of snoring from a brother whose sinuses had been vexed by the autumn damp. Cuthbert sleeps the deep, dreamless sleep of the physically and mentally spent. There are no visions of illuminated letters or monstrous blots of ink. There is only the void, a blessed and empty parchment of the mind. When the bell for the night office rings, its sound is a shock, a violent intrusion into nothingness. It is the middle of the night, a time when the world feels as if it should be permanently asleep. The monks rise, a company of shadows moving with a somnambulate certainty. They file back to the cold church, their voices thick with sleep as they chant the psalms. For Cuthbert, this is the most detached of the offices. He performs the rites, his body moving on the memory of 1,000 previous nights. But his soul feels still half anchored in that deep, restorative silence. The words are a river flowing over stones, wearing them smooth without conscious effort. He returns to his pallet, and sleep this time is lighter, more fragile. He drifts in the space between waking and dreaming, and in that liminal state, he is aware of the faint pre-dawn grey beginning to bleed into the blackness of his cell. He is aware of the coming day. There is no dread in this awareness, only a quiet, resigned acceptance. The Scriptorium awaits. The next page awaits. The cycle is as immutable as the turning of the stars. The morning unfolds as the previous one did, and as the next one will. The same rough bread, the same weak ale, the same slow walk to the Scriptorium. The door groans on the same hinges. The air smells the same. He sits at the same carrel. But there is a subtle difference. Yesterday's finished page is gone, taken away to be stored and eventually bound. In its place on his desk is a new sheet of parchment, blank, pristine, and intimidating in its potential. It is a fresh field to be tilled, a new day's sentence to be served. He picks up his primary quill from yesterday. He examines the nib. It is truly worn now, the slit splayed, the point rounded. It has served its purpose. Without sentiment, he sets it aside in a bowl where such retired quills are kept, to be burned later. He selects a new feather from his small store. He takes up his knife. The process begins again. The slow shaving of the barbs, the careful diagonal slice, the creation of the slit, the test against his thumbnail. It is a ritual of renewal, a small rebirth of purpose at the start of another day. He grinds his inks. He rules his lines with a lead stylus and a straight edge. He dips his new, sharp quill into the glossy black ink. He brings it to the top left corner of the vast, empty page. He takes a slow, quiet breath, the last truly free one he will take for hours. Asterisk, scratch, asterisk. The sound is sharp and clear, the voice of a new tool. The first letter of a new text, a new psalm, a new 1,000 words, begins to form. The droplet of ink is absorbed. The line is drawn. Brother Cuthbert's world shrinks once more to the space between his eye, his hand, and the page. The sun, indifferent, continues its climb. The fly, or perhaps its cousin, returns to buzz at the window. And the slow, patient work of preserving words, of building a book one tedious, perfect letter at a time, continues. As it did for centuries before him, and as it would, in some form, for centuries after. His name would be forgotten, his aches and his small joys lost to time, but the page would remain, a silent testament not to glory, but to grace. And the quiet, scratching rhythm of his quill was, in its own way, a kind of prayer-along, drawn out, monotonous, and deeply holy prayer. The new quill is a stranger. It feels different in the cradle of Brother Cuthbert's fingers, a little stiffer, a little less yielding than the worn companion of yesterday. For the first hour, there is a period of adjustment. A new nib, no matter how perfectly cut, has its own personality. This one seems to catch on the upstrokes, requiring a slight, conscious adjustment in pressure. It is a tiny, silent negotiation between man and tool. He does not grow frustrated. Frustration is a luxury the Scriptorium cannot afford. It leads to rushed strokes, to blots, to the sin of waste. So he adapts. His hand learns the new quill's language, and the quill, in turn, is slowly broken in, its sharpest edges worn away by the relentless texture of the parchment. The morning's work is a slow immersion. The initial focus required to form the first few lines is immense, a conscious directing of every muscle. But then, as always, the transcendence of routine begins. His conscious mind, the part that notices the new quill and the faint chill in the air, begins to recede. The part of his brain that knows the shapes of letters, the part that has copied this particular psalter 3 times before, takes over. He becomes a conduit. The text flows through him, and his hand is merely the mechanism by which it is translated from one page to another. He is not writing, he is a vessel being written asterisk through asterisk. This state, however, is fragile. It is perpetually threatened by the grammar of his own body, a grammar of discomfort. The first note is usually his lower back, a dull, persistent ache that sits at the base of his spine like a small, heavy stone. He ignores it. Then, his neck begins to complain, the muscles tightening from being held in the same, slightly bent position for so long. He rotates his head slowly, a movement so minimal it is almost imperceptible, and hears a faint, gritty crunch. The message is sent, and received, and ignored. The most insistent complainant is his hand. The new quill, not yet molded to his grip, presses in new places. A different spot on his middle finger begins to redden. The muscles in his thumb and forefinger, the pincers of his profession, begin to burn with a low, fiery fatigue. This is the true labor, not the intellectual effort, but the sheer physical endurance of holding a small, delicate object in a position of extreme control for hour upon hour. It is the athleticism of stillness. He pauses. He lays the quill down and slowly, methodically, flexes his hand. He opens it wide, stretching the tendons, then makes a tight fist, feeling the ache deepen. He massages the base of his thumb with the fingers of his other hand. This is not a break for rest. It is maintenance, like oiling a hinge or sharpening a scythe. It is a necessary procedure to ensure the tool, in this case, his own body, can continue to function. He looks at his hand. The red, calloused patch from a lifetime of this work is a permanent feature, a badge of office more telling than any tonsure. It is the map of his vocation, drawn on his skin. He picks up the quill again. The brief respite has allowed the blood to flow, momentarily soothing the burn. The first few strokes are easier, but he knows the discomfort will return. It always does. It is the background hum of his existence, a constant low-level companion to the scratching of the quill. He accepts it. The pain is part of the prayer. The stiffness is part of the service. To create something of permanence, something that will outlive the frail body that created it, requires a trade. The parchment is patient. It will wait for centuries. His body is not, so he pays the price in small, incremental coins of discomfort, for the privilege of adding his small, anonymous verse to the great, silent epic of his faith. The sun climbs higher. A beam of light, thin and sharp as a blade, finds its way through a high window and falls across his desk, illuminating the line he is currently writing. The black ink suddenly looks richer, deeper. The red, a splash of vibrant life. For a moment, the dust on his desk, the worn wood of the carrel, the rough texture of his habit, are all thrown into sharp, golden relief. It is a moment of unexpected beauty, a brief illumination of the mundane. Then a cloud passes, and the light softens, and the world returns to its usual, muted tones. Brother Cuthbert did not even look up. He was already lost again. The brief rebellion of his body quieted, his entire being focused on the next word, and the next, and the next. The slow, patient sacrifice of the body to the word continued, one aching letter at a time. The text he copies now is a particularly dry piece of ecclesiastical law, a commentary on a commentary concerning the proper vestments for a bishop during a minor feast day. It is, by any measure, spectacularly uninteresting. The words are long, latinate, and repetitive. There are no soaring psalms, no dramatic narratives from the Gospels. It is the textual equivalent of watching moss grow on a north-facing wall. And for Brother Cuthbert's purposes, it is perfect. This is where the true, deep magic of the scribe's work happens. When copying exciting or beautiful text, the mind can be tempted to engage with the meaning, to be swept away by the poetry or the drama. This is a danger. A mind that is engaged with the story is a mind that is not fully focused on the form. It can lead to anticipation, to rushing, to a slight tremor of excitement that translates into a wobble in the line. But this treatise on liturgical woolens, this is a safeguard against such lapses. The meaning is a closed door. His mind cannot, and would not wish to, enter. There is only the shape, the pure, unadulterated geometry of the word. Asterisk, de indamentis, lenae, inferis per annum, ... Asterisk, concerning woolen garments on the ferial days throughout the year. He writes the words, and his brain registers only the sequence of letters. The D, with its straight back and rounded belly. The E, with its compact, closed loop. The long, ladder-like series of M's and N's in asterisk indamistes asterisk. This is the liturgy of the line. A ritual as formal and prescribed as any in the church. Each letter is a prayer of form. Each word is a hymn to precision. The content is irrelevant. The execution is everything. His breathing has settled into a rhythm that matches his hand. A slow, shallow inhale. The dip of the quill. The exhale, long and controlled, over the formation of a word, or sometimes just a single, complex letter. The scratch of the nib is the percussion to this slow, respiratory chant. In, dip, out, scratch, in, dip, out, scratch. He is a machine of devotion, an engine of replication. The outside world has not so much faded as it has become entirely theoretical. There is a war in the Holy Land. A king has died in France. The price of grain has risen in the nearby town. These are rumors, whispers from a planet that orbits a different sun. His planet is here, bounded by the wooden walls of his carol, illuminated by the slow-moving sunbeam, governed by the immutable law of the exemplar. He becomes aware of a need, a slight, growing pressure in his bladder. It is the body's most mundane and persistent interruption. He ignores it for a line. Then, too, the need intensifies, becoming a quiet, urgent tap on the shoulder of his concentration. He is at a natural break the end of a sentence. With a sigh that is more physical than mental, he lays the quill down. The spell is broken. The walk to the latrine is a journey into a different kind of silence. The Scriptorium's silence is a focused, productive one. The silence of the stone corridor is empty, hollow. His footsteps echo. He does his business quickly. The sound of his own water hitting the stone channel below a stark, biological reminder of the frail vessel that contains his scribe's soul. He washes his hands in the cold water from the lavabo. The shock of the temperature, a brief, sharp awakening. Returning to the Scriptorium is like diving back into warm water. The silence welcomes him back, wraps around him. The smell of ink and parchment is the smell of home. He sits, he flexes his fingers, he picks up the quill, he finds his place on the page. It takes a moment to re-enter the state. The first few letters are clumsy, the connection between eye, mind, and hand momentarily frayed. But then, like a needle finding the groove in a well-worn record, it catches. The rhythm returns. The breath settles. The scratching resumes. Nisi in casu necessitatis aut privilegi specialis. Asterisk, unless in cases of necessity or special privilege. He writes the words, his mind a perfect blank slate. The complaint of his body, the journey to the latrine, the chill of the water roll are already fading, becoming as irrelevant as the meaning of the words he now copies. There is only the line, the next line, and the line after that, the great, endless, soothing river of lines, carrying him forward, moment by moment, toward the eventual, merciful release of the evening bell. The seamless tapestry of the afternoon is briefly torn by a sound that does not belong. Not the familiar, internal sounds of the monastery, but an external one. The distant, metallic clang of a hammer on an anvil, carried on a wayward breeze from the village beyond the abbey walls. It is a sharp, percussive, profane sound. It speaks of horseshoes, of cart axles, of the rough, unvarnished business of the world. In the Scriptorium, the sound is an intrusion. A brother to carols, down flinches, his quill jumping and leaving a tiny, unintended spur of ink on his page. He lets out a soft, frustrated sigh, the loudest emotional expression heard in the room all day. Brother Cuthbert, however, does not flinch. His hand continues its steady course, the line of text flowing uninterrupted. He registers the sound. Of course, it is impossible not to. But he has built, over decades, a psychic fortress around his work. The sound of the blacksmith is like a pebble thrown against its high, thick walls. It makes a noise, but it does not penetrate. His mind, ever so briefly, provides the image. A burly man, his face smudged with soot, muscles straining as he shapes a glowing iron rod. The heat of the forge, the smell of coal smoke. It is a vivid, almost tactile flash. And then, just as quickly, he lets it go. He watches the thought form and then dissipate, like a breath on a cold window pane. It is not his world. His world is here, in the cool, silent patience of the vellum. The blacksmith's work is loud, hot, and temporary. A horseshoe will wear down in months. A cart axle will break. The word of God, captured in this ink, is meant to be eternal. There is no contest. The incident passes. The brother who flinched is now carefully scraping away his error, a lesson in the cost of a wandering mind. The silence reknits itself, somehow feeling deeper and more profound for having been briefly challenged. Cuthbert's own text continues, unruffled. He is copying a genealogy now, a long, winding list of begats, asterisk, Abraham, Genuit, Isaac, Autumn, Genuit, Iacob, Genuit, Iudam, ... asterisk. It is the most monotonous of tasks, a river of names with no variation, no adjectives, no story. It is, in its own way, a perfect tool for spiritual conditioning. It trains the soul in humility, in the acceptance of a task that offers no intellectual reward, only the simple, bare fact of its own completion. He falls into the rhythm of the names. They become pure pattern, pure sequence. The shapes of the letters are more familiar than the patriarchs they represent. His mind, having defended itself against the outside world, now turns inward, but not to think. It simply rests. It becomes a clear, still pool, reflecting only the slow, passing clouds of the letters he forms. This is the highest state of his craft. Not focus, but a kind of active emptiness. The quill moves, the text appears, but the self is absent. He is a conduit, a channel, a clear glass through which the light of the text passes unchanged. The light in the room begins to take on the particular, golden quality that signifies the slow, inevitable surrender of the day. The sunbeam that had been his companion since noon has now stretched into a long, lazy finger of light, pointing across the floor towards the far wall. It is filled with more dust than ever, a frantic, final dance before the darkness. He knows, without looking up at the sky, that perhaps an hour of work remains. The end of the page is in sight. The final few lines of the genealogy loom, a distant shore he is slowly, patiently approaching. A faint hollow feeling in his stomach signals the approach of the evening meal. This, too, is a part of the rhythm. The body's clock is as reliable as the abbey's bells. He acknowledges the hunger, notes it, and then sets it aside on a high shelf in his mind, next to the ache in his back and the memory of the blacksmith's hammer. They are all there, these distractions, these mortal complaints, but they are not permitted to touch the work. The work is sacred. The work is separate. He dips his quill once more. The ink is lower in the pot now. He will have to ask for a new batch soon. Another small, practical thought that comes and goes. He brings the nib to the parchment asterisk. Iosif, autumn ver Maria, de quae natus, estiesus, ... asterisk. The name appears, one careful, black stroke at a time. The most important name in the lineage, rendered with the same dispassionate, meticulous care as all the others. For Brother Cuthbert, in this moment, it is just the next word, the next sequence of letters, the next step on the long, quiet road to the end of the page. And that is exactly as it should be. The golden haze that had filled the Scriptorium now thickens into something more substantial. A deep honeyed amber that seems to pool in the corners and cling to the edges of the parchment. The world outside the high windows is turning a soft, bruised purple. Brother Cuthbert's eyes, which have been instruments of pinpoint accuracy all day, are now beginning to strain. The sharp black lines of his text are softening, blurring at the edges. The white of the parchment is no longer a bright field but a muted off-white grey. He is working against the dying of the light. He has reached the final section of the page, not the main text, but the colophon, the few lines where he, the scribe, is permitted a fleeting moment of identity, a whisper of self in a vast ocean of copied text. It is usually a simple formula, *finitus est hic liber, *, this book is finished, followed by his name and the date. But tonight, perhaps spurred by the weariness that makes him feel more mortal, more individual, he allows himself a small, permitted vanity. He will not just write it, he will flourish it. He sets aside his workhorse black quill. He picks up a finer one, reserved for such details. He prepares a small amount of ink, not the common black, but the deep, rich brown made from crushed oak galls, a slightly warmer, more personal tone. He takes a breath, not of labor, but of intention. This is for him. He begins. *finitus est ... The letters are formed with a little more care, a little more grace. Then, on the final word, his name, Cuthbertus, he allows his hand to drift. On the last S, instead of ending with a simple curve, the line continues. It dips, loops, and trails off into a delicate, swirling tendril that curls back underneath the name, a simple, elegant knot of ink. It is a tiny masterpiece of meaninglessness, a brief, visual sigh at the end of a long day. It serves no purpose other than to say, I was here, my hand did this, he lays the quill down. It is over, the page is complete. The journey from the blank, intimidating rectangle of vellum to this filled, living thing is done. He feels a hollow exhaustion, but it is a clean hollow, like a field after harvest. The bell for Vespers begins to ring. The sound is different now, wrapped in the velvet of the twilight. It does not feel like a summons, but an invitation to rest. He performs the final rituals of the desk. He cleans the fine quill with extra care, watching the brown ink stain the cloth. He caps the ink pots. He aligns his tools with a precision that is now purely habitual, his hands moving without instruction from his tired mind. He stands. The aches return all at once, a chorus of complaints he had silenced during the final push. His back, his neck, his hand, they all speak at once, and he listens to them now with a kind of distant sympathy. This body has served him well today. It has earned its rest. He walks to the door of the Scriptorium. He pauses for a moment on the threshold, looking back into the room. It is filled with a deep blue gloom, the desks silent and empty. The lingering scent of ink is like a ghost of the day's industry. His own carol is just a darker shadow in the shadows. He closes the door. The solid wooden thud is the final punctuation mark on the day's long sentence. The corridor is cool and dark. He walks towards the church, not with the purposeful stride of the morning, but with the slow, heavy tread of a man returning from a long voyage. The prayers of Vespers are a murmur, a soothing balm on his abraded consciousness. The words are familiar, their meaning absorbed not through intellect, but through the very bones of his routine. Later, in the refectory, the bread tastes like bread, the soup tastes like soup. The simple, unadorned flavors are a perfect match for his simple, unadorned state of mind. He is empty of thought, full of fatigue. The chatter of the other brothers is a distant river, and he is a stone on the bank, listening to its sound without being carried away by its current. The walk to the dormitory is the last, short pilgrimage. The night air is cool on his face. In his cell, the rituals of undressing are performed with a slow, weary grace. The rough blanket is a welcome weight. As he lies in the darkness, the phantom of the quill still tingles in his fingers. The lines of text scroll behind his closed eyelids for a few last fleeting moments. Then, the silence of the night reaches out and gathers him in. There is no past, no future. There is only this deep, encompassing darkness, and the profound, grateful stillness of a task completed. The scribe is done. The man may rest. Dawn, when it comes again, feels less like a beginning and more like a subtle shift in the quality of the darkness. The bell, for the night office, is a dull ache of sound that vibrates through the floorboards of the dormitory. Brother Cuthbert rises, his body protesting with a symphony of familiar pains. The stiffness in his back has settled in during the night, a constant companion that will only loosen, never fully leave, as the day wears on. The callus on his finger is a dull, hard presence. He moves through the pre-dawn rituals, the prayer, the meager meal with the serene automation of a water wheel turning in a slow, endless stream. Returning to the Scriptorium is like slipping on a familiar, heavy garment. The smell is the same, the silence is the same, but the page is new, always a new page. He sits, and the wooden stool groans a greeting it has groaned 1,000 times before. He looks at the blank vellum, a field of potential that feels, today, more like a sentence than an opportunity. This is the true test of his vocation, not the love of the work on the inspired days, but the simple, dogged persistence on the weary ones. His first quill of the day, the one he so carefully cut yesterday, is already spent. The nib is splayed, worn down by the relentless friction of the page. He picks it up, looks at its ruined tip, and sets it aside in the bowl of retired quills without sentiment. He selects a new one. The ritual of preparation begins again. The shaving of the barbs, the slicing of the nib, the testing. His hands perform these tasks perfectly, but his heart is not in it. Today, the process feels like what it is, manual labor. He begins to write. The first strokes are clumsy. His hand feels foreign. The new quill an unwelcome stranger. The letters are acceptable, but they lack the effortless grace they sometimes achieve. They are workmanlike. He is building a wall, one heavy, textual brick at a time. The text today is a calendar of saints' days, a list of names and dates, asterisk, Januarius, Felicitas, Marius, Martha, ... asterisk. It is a river of names, a torrent of sanctity that feels to his weary soul overwhelmingly long. His concentration is a frayed rope. It snaps, repeatedly, on the hooks of his own physical being. The ache in his lower back is a persistent throb. A slight itch develops on his nose, and he must pause to scratch it, a moment of profound irritation. The sound of his own breathing suddenly seems too loud in his ears. He becomes hyper-aware of the dryness in his throat. These tiny, bodily rebellions are the true adversaries of the scribe. Not ignorance, not sloth, but the simple, maddening grammar of the flesh. He pushes through. This is the unglamorous core of the life. This is the long, flat stretch of the spiritual road, where there are no vistas, only dust. He copies the names. He forms the letters. His mind wanders to nothing in particular, a memory of a particularly vivid patch of Mass on the cloister walk, the sound of a specific bird he heard yesterday. These are not thoughts, but mental driftwood, carried on the sluggish current of his fatigue. The morning light strengthens, but it offers no inspiration. It only illuminates the sheer volume of work that remains. The blank portion of the page seems vast, the written portion pitifully small. He does not calculate, does not despair. He simply continues. Dip, scratch, form. Dip, scratch, form. The rhythm is a mantra, not of enlightenment, but of endurance. He is not creating beauty today. He is simply fulfilling a contract, one he signed with his life decades ago. A fly lands on the edge of his desk. It cleans its forelegs with an infuriating fastidiousness. He watches it for a full minute, a minute stolen from the saint's calendar. Then, with a slow, deliberate motion, he waves a hand. The fly buzzes away. The interruption is over. He dips his quill again. The ink is a little lower in the pot. The day is a little older. He is a little wearier. But the line continues, unbroken. The wall of text grows, one stubborn, unexceptional letter at a time. This, too, is prayer, perhaps the purest kind. The prayer that is offered not from a feeling of devotion, but from the simple, unyielding fact of duty. The sun completes its slow, vertical climb, and for a brief, still moment, stands directly overhead. In the Scriptorium, this is marked not by a brightening, but by a peculiar flattening of the light. The sharp, long shadows of morning have show-sword ed and vanished, leaving the room bathed in a uniform, grey-white illumination that reveals every scratch on the desks, every flake of dried ink, every undulation in the parchment. It is an unforgiving light, a light without poetry. For Brother Cuthbert, it is simply the marker of the day's midpoint. His body has passed through the initial resistance and found a new, lower gear. The aches have not vanished, but they have been assimilated. They are now part of the background noise of his existence, like the taste of his own mouth or the weight of his own clothes. His hand moves with a mechanical certainty, the weariness having burned away any capacity for flourish or hesitation. The script he produces in this state is, paradoxically, some of his most consistent. It is pure, unadulterated form, stripped of any fleeting emotion. The text continues its relentless march. The calendar of saints gives way to a theological treatise on the nature of angelic hierarchies. It is, if possible, even more abstract and dry. Asterisk, utrum angeli, posent pecere. Asterisk, whether angels can sin. He copies the question, and the long winding answer that concludes they cannot. The debate, which once consumed the finest minds of the church, registers in his consciousness as a sequence of grammatical constructions. A conditional clause here, a subjunctive verb there. He is a mason building a wall with stones, whose inscriptions he does not read. He becomes aware of a new sensation, a faint, rhythmic pulse in the tip of his index finger, where it presses against the quill. It is the ghost of his own heartbeat, transmitted through the wood of the pen and the bone of his finger. Asterisk, scratch scratch, thump thump, scratch scratch, thump thump. Asterisk, the two rhythms, one created, one innate, fall into a loose, asynchronous syncopation. It is a strangely intimate duet, the only music in the silent room. The world outside has grown quiet. The blacksmith has finished his work. The birds have ceased their morning clamor. The only sound is the collective, soft exhalation of a dozen men breathing, and the gentle, persistent scratching of their quills. It is a sound so woven into the fabric of the place that if it were to suddenly stop, the silence would be deafening, a physical pressure. He allows himself a glance at the page as a whole. He is halfway down. The top half is a solid block of text, a conquered territory. The bottom half is the land that remains to be tamed. The line he is currently writing is the frontier. He does not feel triumph, only a mild geographical satisfaction. He knows this landscape. He has crossed it many times. His inkpot is nearly empty. He sees the bottom of the small ceramic jar, a dark, glazed circle. He uses the last few drops to complete a sentence, then sets the quill aside. The pause to fetch a new pot is a scheduled interruption. He walks to the large, common inkwell kept on a central table, his soft shoes whispering on the stone. He dips his own small pot into the larger vessel, filling it with the glossy, black liquid. The action is simple, communal. He is one worker replenishing his tools from the common store. He returns to his carrel. The brief walk has stirred the stiffness in his legs. He sits, and the familiar posture feels both comforting and constricting. He dips his newly filled quill. The first stroke with the fresh ink is bold, dark, and confident. It is a small renewal, a new pot of ink for the second half of the page, a new reservoir of patience for the second half of the day. He begins again. The question of angelic sin is behind him. Now, the text moves on to the physical location of paradise. His hand moves, forming the letters for asterisk, paradisus. Asterisk, the P with its long descending tail, the S like a soft snake at the end. He does not picture lush gardens or flowing rivers. He pictures only the shape of the word, its architecture, its place on the line. The meaning is a distant country, one he has no need to visit. His home is here, in the quiet, in the rhythm, in the slow, steady application of ink to page. The patina of hours is settling upon him, a fine, spiritual dust that mutes all sharp edges, leaving only the smooth, worn surface of ritual. The afternoon light began its slow, golden surrender. The uniform grey-white glare was gone, replaced by long, slanting beams that carved the scriptorium into planes of light and deep velvety shadow. Dust, once again, became a visible entity, dancing in these final, theatrical shafts of sun. For Brother Cuthbert, the changing light was not a spectacle, but a timepiece. It was the visible draining of the day's allotment of work. His focus, once a sharp blade, was now a worn, blunt instrument. The deep, flowing state of the morning was a distant memory. Now, his concentration was a conscious effort, a wall he had to prop up with constant, weary attention. He noticed small things he would normally filter out, the way a tiny splinter on the edge of his desk caught the light, the sound of his own swallowing, the gradual softening of the parchment's texture as the day's humidity subtly affected it. His hand was betraying him, not with large mistakes, but with tiny, almost imperceptible tremors. A downstroke would waver, ever so slightly. The crossbar of a T would be not quite level. These were flaws only he would ever see, but they felt like moral failures. Each one was a small sigh in the quiet of his soul. He was tired, deeply, fundamentally tired. The reservoir of physical precision he drew upon was nearing its dregs. The text seemed to mock his fatigue. It had moved on from paradise to a list of donations to the monastery, litany of names, plots of land, and numbers of sheep. Asterisk Earl Godwin grants 5 hides of land at a place called Linacre ... Asterisk, it was the most mundane of histories, the grinding of secular life against the walls of the spiritual. He copied the names of the donors, men long dead, their generosity now reduced to a line in a ledger. He felt a strange kinship with them in this moment. They, too, were dust. Their names were all that remained, preserved by the aching hands of scribes like him. He paused to flex his hand, and the cramp that shot through it was sharp and immediate. He winced, a brief, silent contortion of his face. This was no longer the dull ache of endurance. This was a specific complaint, a pointed warning from his body that he was nearing its limit. He looked at the page. Only a few lines remained. They seemed to swim before his eyes, a distant shore that was receding even as he approached it. He dipped his quill for what he knew was one of the final times. The ink was still plentiful, but his strength was not. He began the second to last line. The letters formed slowly, each one a small negotiation between his will and the rebellion of his muscles. He thought of nothing but the next letter. Not the word, not the sentence, just the next shape his hand needed to form. It was a reduction of existence to its most basic component. He was no longer a monk, a scribe, a man. He was a mechanism for making an A, then AN, then a D. The final line. He took a breath, a shallow, weary thing. He started the last sentence of the legal record, asterisk. This grant is made for the salvation of his soul and the souls of his ancestors. Asterisk, the irony was lost on him. His own soul felt heavy, anchored by the leaden fatigue in his body. He formed the final word, asterisk ancestorum. Asterisk, the last M was a little shaky. The final R was a bit too blunt. It would have to suffice. He laid the quill down. It was over. He did not look at the page with satisfaction. He looked at it with the hollow-eyed gaze of a man who has just finished a long, difficult journey and can only think of the weight of his own pack. The light was almost gone. The scriptorium was filled with a deep, blue twilight. Around him, he could hear the other brothers also concluding their work. The soft sounds of pots being sealed, of stools scraping gently against the floor. He performed the closing rituals of his desk by touch as much as by sight. His hands moved over the familiar objects, capping the ink, wiping the nib, aligning the exemplar. His movements were slow, dreamlike. The bell for Vespers began to ring, its tone deep and resonant in the evening air. It was not a call to prayer, but a release, a pardon. He stood, his body unfolded with a series of pops and creaks, a personal, anatomical Vespers service. He walked away from the carol, from the completed page, from the accumulated weight of the day. He did not look back. The work was done. The silence of the scriptorium was no longer a medium for creation, but simply an emptiness, and Brother Cuthbert, his own vessel emptied, moved towards the chapel to be filled, if only for a moment, with something other than the silence and the scratch of his own quill. The world had changed overnight. Brother Cuthbert awoke not to the usual pre-dawn stillness, but to the gentle, percussive patter of rain on the slate roof above the dormitory. It was a soft, steady rain, the kind that promised to last all day. As he made his way to the scriptorium, the world was washed in shades of grey and green. The stone of the cloisters was dark and slick, the air heavy with the scent of wet earth and damp wool. The scriptorium, on such a day, felt like a cave, a haven against the elements. The light that filtered through the high windows was a muted, watery grey, devoid of warmth or sharpness. It was a light that demanded candles, and soon the soft, flickering glow of tallow dips bloomed at several carols, including his own. The small, dancing flame created a tiny island of light in the general gloom, a private sun under which his work could continue. The sound of the rain was a new layer in the symphony of the scriptorium. It was a constant, hushed white noise, a backdrop against which the scratching of the quill seemed smaller, more intimate. Asterisk scratch, scratch patter, patter, scratch dash, patter, dash patter. Asterisk, the rhythm was soothing, a natural metronome for his labor. His own breathing seemed to slow to match its cadence. The text today was a psalter. He was copying the Psalms of David, words he knew by heart. The familiar phrases flowed from his exemplar, through his hand, and onto the page with a comfortable ease. Asterisk, Dominus, illuminatio, me, ... Asterisk, the Lord is my light. The irony of copying this by candlelight in a dim room on a rainy day did not occur to him. The words were shapes, patterns of devotion. Their comfort was in their familiarity, not their meaning. The rain created a profound sense of isolation, sealing the Scriptorium off from the rest of the world even more completely than usual. The monastery became the entire universe. The fields, the village, the distant roads all were swallowed by the grey curtain of water. There was only this stone room, this pool of candlelight, this page. The outside world was a rumor, a half-remembered dream. His hand moved steadily. The rain seemed to wash away the residual stiffness from the previous day. The constant, gentle sound was a narcotic, lulling him into a deep, trance-like state. He was not copying text. He was a node in a great, timeless circuit, transmitting sacred words from the past into the future, with the rain as his witness. The flickering candle flame cast his own shadow, large and distorted. On the wall behind him, a silent, dancing giant, whose only purpose was to form letters. Hours bled into one another, marked only by the gradual shortening of his candle and the unvarying patter on the roof. He did not think of the damp chill in the air, or the way his wool habit felt heavy with the humidity. He was part of the weather now, a creature of the Scriptorium cave, his existence defined by the simple, repeating loop of dip, scratch, form. When the bell for sext rang, its sound was muffled, softened by the blanket of rain. The brothers filed out and back, their hoods up, their footsteps dampened. The brief foray into the wet world was a shock, a reminder of a reality that felt increasingly abstract. Returning to the Scriptorium was like returning to the womb, dark, warm in its own way, and safe. He worked through the afternoon as the rain continued its endless whisper. He lit a new one from the old, the flame leaping to life and restoring his small island of light. The page was nearly full. The psalms were nearing their end. His world had been, for this entire day, no larger than the circle of illumination cast by that single, steady flame. The scratch of the quill was his prayer, the falling rain the only answer. The weeks turned, not with the dramatic cadence of seasons, but with the slow, patient turning of pages. The rain gave way to days of brittle sunshine, which in turn softened into a persistent, damp chill that settled deep into the stone of the monastery. Brother Cuthbert's world remained a perfect, insulated sphere of routine. He woke in the dark, prayed, ate, and took his place in the Scriptorium. The specific text he copied changed to Psalter was finished. A volume of St. Augustine's sermons was begun, but the action itself was a constant, a heartbeat. He had entered a state of profound stasis. The initial aches of his body had not vanished, but they had been fully incorporated into his being. They were no longer complaints. They were simply the physical facts of his existence, as inherent as the color of his eyes. The callus on his finger was a permanent feature, a hardened leathery pad that no longer registered pain, only pressure. His back had a permanent curve, a slight forward hunch that felt more natural than standing fully straight. He had become a creature perfectly adapted to its environment, like a limpet to a rock. His mind, too, had achieved a kind of flatline serenity. The fleeting distractions of the outside world, the blacksmith's hammer, a bird's song, the scent of baking bread from the kitchens, no longer provoked even a flicker of conscious thought. They were registered and dismissed by a psyche that had been honed to a single purpose. The dry theological debates of Augustine, the complex Latin sentences that would have tied a scholar's mind in knots, were to him merely sequences of shapes. He copied arguments about predestination and free will with the same dispassionate precision he applied to a list of vestments or a genealogy. He was, in many ways, the ideal scribe. He was a flawless instrument. The text passed through him unaltered, uncolored by his own opinions, his own boredom, his own faith, or lack thereof. His work was pure. It was replication in its most sacred form. He was a conduit for the word, and a conduit must be empty. One afternoon, a rare thing happened. A small, spider-like crack appeared in the side of his common ink pot. He noticed it only when a dark, glossy bead of ink welled through and traced a slow path down the ceramic side. He watched it for a moment, this small, silent disruption of the order of his desk. Then, with the same methodical calm with which he corrected a blot, he reached for a rag, wiped the pot clean, and set it aside on a tile used for broken things. He fetched a new pot from the central store, a pot identical in every way to the old one. He placed it in the exact same spot. The incident was over. The equilibrium was restored. The only thing that marked the passage of time was the slow accumulation of finished pages on the shelf beside his carrel. The stack grew a quiet monument to days that were otherwise indistinguishable from one another. He did not feel pride in this accumulation. It was simply evidence of work done, of time spent. The completed pages were the shed skin of a life being lived. At times, in the deep silence of the late afternoon, a strange thought would surface, not from his own mind, but from the text he was copying. A phrase from Augustine would echo in the hollow space of his consciousness. Asterisk, our heart is unquiet until it rests in you. Asterisk, he would write the words, his hand forming the letters for unquiet asterisk, inquietum, asterisk, with their sharp Q and looping U, and for a fleeting second, the word would resonate. Asterisk inquietum, asterisk unquiet. Was his heart unquiet? He searched within himself and found no answer, only the steady, metronomic rhythm of his breath and the soft scratch of the quill. The silence that followed the thought was not a peaceful one, but a vast and empty one. Then he would dip his quill again, and a moment would pass. The thought reabsorbed into the great, silent ocean of his routine. He was a man in the world, but not of it. He was a keeper of words, but had none of his own. His life was a cycle of small, repeated actions, a wheel turning in a dark room, its purpose known only to the God for whom he copied. Letter by patient letter, day by identical day, into the gathering twilight. Then, one morning, the quality of the cold changed. It was no longer the damp chill of autumn, but a sharp, brittle cold that bit at the ears and made the stone floors feel like sheets of iron. Winter had laid its claim upon the monastery. When Brother Cuthbert entered the Scriptorium, his breath blossomed before him in a pale, fleeting cloud. The high windows were etched with delicate, fern-like patterns of frost, turning the outside world into a blurred, white mystery. The cold introduced a new set of challenges, a new liturgy of minor adversities. The first was the ink. It was thick, sluggish with the cold. When he dipped his quill, it came up laden with a viscous, almost tarry substance that refused to flow smoothly. He had to hold the pot over the small candle flame at his desk for a few moments, warming it just enough to restore its liquidity. It was a careful balance. Too much heat could damage the ink, too little made writing impossible. The ritual of warming the ink became part of his morning, a necessary negotiation with the season. The parchment, too, was transformed. It was stiffer, more resistant. The quill no longer whispered across its surface. It scraped, with a higher, slightly raspy tone. The vellum, made from animal skin, seemed to remember its origins, becoming tougher, more resilient in the face of the cold. His hand had to work harder, applying more consistent pressure to form clean lines. The familiar ache in his muscles returned with a new intensity, a winter-specific companion. But the most profound change was the evidence of his own life in the room. His breath, with every exhale, a small cloud of vapor formed in the air before him, a temporary, living ghost in the stillness. It hovered for a second between his face and the page, a visible sign of his presence in the frozen silence, and then it vanished. In, a cloud. Out, a scratch. In, a cloud. Out, a scratch. He was no longer a silent, disembodied hand. He was a creature of warmth, a fragile engine of life, operating in a world of stone and frost. The text he copied seemed to resonate with the season. It was from the Book of Job. Asterisk, decoius, utero egressa, est glacies, et gelou, jekailu, kijanu, asterisk, from whose womb has come the ice, and the frost of heaven, who has given it birth. He wrote the words, his hand moving slowly in the cold, the ink flowing reluctantly from his warmed pot. He did not ponder the cosmic question. He simply formed the letters for ice. Asterisk, glacies, asterisk, and frost. Asterisk, gelu, asterisk. The words themselves felt cold on the page, their angular shapes like tiny shards of the winter outside. His candle, once a source of mere light, became a source of life-sustaining warmth. He would occasionally hold his hands near it, not close enough to risk a burn, but just close enough to feel the faintest radiation of heat against his stiff, aching fingers. The flame was a tiny, defiant sun in his personal, miniature winter. Its light flickered over the frost-etched windows, creating illusions of movement, of a world outside that was alive with crystalline spirits. The cold deepened the silence. It was a crisp, hard silence, one that seemed to ring faintly in the ears. The sounds of the other scribes were muffled, as if the cold itself was absorbing the noise. The scratch of his quill was the only sound that mattered, the only thing proving that time had not frozen solid, along with the water in the lavabo outside. He worked on, a figure in a frozen landscape of his own making. The breath clouded before his face. The ink slowly cooled in its pot, requiring another warming. The candle burned down. He was engaged in a slow, patient battle against the elements, a battle whose only victory was the completion of a line, a sentence, a page. The words of Job gave way to words of hope, of a time when the waters are hid as with a stone, and the face of the deep is frozen. But Brother Cuthbert did not look for spring. He only looked for the end of the page. The winter was eternal in the moment. His task was eternal in the moment. And in the marriage of the two, there was a strange, cold, and perfect peace. The scribe and the season were one, bound in a silent, frozen pact, until the bell would ring and he would step out. His breath a great cloud in the twilight, and walked through the bitter air to the next prayer, and the next day, and the next page.
The cold became a tangible presence in the Scriptorium, a third occupant of every carol sitting between the scribe and his work. It was a predatory cold, one that sought out any weakness. It seeped through the thick wool of habits. It crept up from the stone floor through the thin soles of leather shoes, and it lay in wait in the metal of the inkpot stands, ready to steal away the last vestiges of warmth from a man's fingertips. Brother Cuthbert's morning routine now included a new and desperate battle, the battle with the frozen ink. On this particular morning, the cold had won the night. A thin, dark skin of ice had formed over the surface of the black ink in his main pot. He stared at it for a long moment, his breath pluming in the faint light. There was no point trying to write with it. It would shred his quill and tear the parchment. With a sigh that crystallized in the air, he picked up the small ceramic pot. He could feel the intense cold of it even through his calloused fingers. His only recourse was the central hearth in the refectory, a good 100 paces away through freezing cloisters. This was a significant loss of time, a disruption in the sacred geometry of his day. He wrapped his hands around the pot, as if his own meager body heat could somehow defeat the winter within it, and trudged out of the Scriptorium. The journey was a trial. The wind, sharp as a scribe's knife, cut through the cloister arches, finding the gap between his hood and his neck. His eyes watered, the tears feeling like they might freeze on his cheeks. By the time he reached the refectory, his hands were numb and clumsy. He held the ink pot over the low banked fire, rotating it slowly, watching as the dark skin of ice melted back into a glossy liquid. He dared not overheat it. The delicate balance of the ink could be ruined. The moment it was fluid, he turned and began the cold journey back, holding the now warm pot against his chest, a tiny, fleeting furnace beneath his robes. Back at his carrel, the warmth was already leaching from the ceramic. He had to work quickly. He dipped his quill and began to write. The first few words flowed, but he could feel the ink thickening with every second. His hand, now returned to the frozen air of the Scriptorium, was losing its feeling. The familiar grip on the quill became a vague, distant pressure. He was writing by memory and sight now, his hand a numb alien thing attached to his wrist. The text was a chronicle of a long-dead abbot's reign, the words blurred before his stinging eyes. Asterisk in the year of our Lord 942. The winter was of such severity that the wine froze in the cups. Asterisk. He copied the phrase, his own reality mirroring the ancient record. His own ink was freezing in its pot. The wheel of time turned, but some things remained miserably constant. He felt a strange, cold kinship with that anonymous scribe from centuries past, who must have also sat shivering, fighting the same battle to keep the words flowing. His fingers began to ache with a deep, bony pain, the kind that spoke of the marrow within. The numbness was being replaced by a burning sensation, as if his fingertips were being held against a faint, cold flame. He made a mistake. A simple word, ecclesia, and the S was malformed, its curve collapsing into a clumsy zigzag. He stared at the error, a black scar on the pale parchment. In the summer, he would have sighed and reached for his knife. Now, the thought of handling the cold metal blade with his agonizing fingers was too much to bear. The floor would remain, a permanent testament to the winter of his discomfort. He pressed on, his jaw clenched against the cold. The rhythm of his work was gone, replaced by a frantic, shivering race against the cooling ink and his own failing dexterity. Each dip of the quill was a gamble. Would the ink be fluid enough? Each stroke was a question. Would his hand obey? He was no longer a conduit for the divine word. He was a beleaguered soldier losing ground in a frozen trench. The bell for the midday office was a mercy. He set the quill down, his hand curling into a stiff, aching claw. He looked at the page. It was a mess, by his standards. The script was uneven, the lines wavered, and the infamous flawed S stood out like a beacon of his failure. But it was done. Another page rested from the grip of the cold. As he stood, his body protesting with a chorus of aches, he looked at the frost on the windows. It was thicker now, a solid, opaque white, sealing them in completely. The outside world was gone. There was only this frozen room, the aching body, and the silent, waiting stack of blank parchment. The battle was lost for today, but the war, he knew, would resume tomorrow, and the next day, and the day after that, for as long as the winter held them in its icy grip.
The cold was not merely an absence of warmth, it was an active, draining force. It leached the strength from his muscles and the sharpness from his mind. As the afternoon of that frozen day wore on, Brother Cuthbert felt a profound weariness settle into his bones, a heavy lethargy that the cold seemed to magnify. It was an effort to simply lift the quill. To dip it into the pot he had to warm yet again over the guttering candle flame. The candle itself was failing. It had burned low, and the pool of melted tallow was deep, threatening to drown the wick. The flame, once a steady, upright tongue of light, now flickered and danced erratically, casting jittering, monstrous shadows that leaped across the pages of his codex. This unsteady light made his task even more difficult. The familiar letters of the chronicles seemed to shift and waver, their forms becoming ambiguous in the dance of shadow and light. He had to squint, bringing his face closer to the parchment, the cold air of the page brushing against his cheeks. The text he was copying offered no comfort. It spoke of a plague that had swept through the monastery to centuries prior. And so many of the brothers were taken to God that there were not enough left to sing the offices, and the fields lay fallow for want of hands to till them. Asterisk, he wrote these words of desolation, his numb hand tracing the shapes of death and abandonment. The cold in the scriptorium began to feel like the chill of the grave. The silence was no longer peaceful, but hollow, like that of an abandoned church. He felt the weight of the chain of scribes who had come before him, a chain of silent men in cold rooms, copying words of past sorrows to ensure they were not forgotten, even as their own present sorrows went unrecorded. A fit of shivering seized him. It was a violent, uncontrollable tremor that started in his core and rattled out to his extremities. His teeth chattered, and the quill shook in his hand, skittering across the page and leaving a trail of jagged ink-blotted marks like the track of a frantic insect. He dropped the pen, the clatter of it on the wooden desk, shockingly loud in the silence. He wrapped his arms around himself, his hands clutching at the rough wool of his sleeves, trying to still the convulsions that racked his frame. For a long minute, he simply sat, hunched and shivering, his breath coming in ragged, visible gasps. The flame of the candle guttered wildly in the disturbance of air. This was more than discomfort. It was a breaking point. The monastic ideal of enduring hardship with silent equanimity felt like a distant, theoretical concept. In this moment, he was just a cold, tired old man, fighting a losing battle against the elements. The sacred duty of preserving knowledge felt absurd, a futile gesture against the immense, indifferent cold that filled the universe. What did it matter if one more chronicle was copied? The plague would still have happened. The brothers would still have died. The winter would still return, year after year, to freeze the ink and numb the hands of those who came after. The candle flame sputtered, dimmed, and then, with a final, defiant flicker, went out. Darkness swallowed his carol. It was immediate and absolute. The faint grey light from the frost-covered windows was insufficient to read by. He could not see the page. He could not see his hands. He was adrift in a black, frozen sea. The only sound was his own, still shuddering breath. He did not move. There was no point. He had no other source of light. He simply sat in the darkness, the cold seeping into him more deeply than ever, the unfinished line of text hanging in the void before his blind eyes. The shivering slowly subsided, leaving behind a deep, penetrating cold and a profound sense of defeat. He was beaten. The day had won. He did not know how long he sat there, suspended in the blackness. It could have been minutes. It could have been an hour. Time had lost its meaning. But then, a sliver of awareness returned. A sliver of the training that was deeper than thought, deeper than despair. The office of Vespers would be soon. The bell would ring. There was a rhythm, even to this. Even in the darkness, the wheel of the hours turned. Slowly, stiffly, as if his joints were frozen solid, he began the process of shutting down his work for the day. By touch alone, his numb fingers found the inkpot and sealed it. They found the quill and wiped it clean on a rag whose texture was the only familiar thing in the blackness. They aligned the exemplar and closed its cover. The actions were robotic, performed by a body that remembered its duties even when the spirit within had faltered. When he was done, he simply sat again, his hands resting on the cold wood of the desk, waiting in the impenetrable gloom. He was waiting for the bell, waiting for the signal that this particular trial was over. The cold was now a part of him, and the darkness was a part of the room. There was no fighting it anymore. There was only waiting. And in that acceptance, a strange, cold peace finally descended. The battle was over. For now, the darkness was not silent. In the absence of sight, his other senses sharpened with a painful acuity. He could hear the slow, settling groan of the ancient timber in the roof. He could hear the faint, almost imperceptible crackle of the frost on the windows, tightening its grip, and he could smell the sharp, greasy scent of the extinguished candle wick, a ribbon of smoke that stung the air, the ghost of his lost light. He tasted it on his tongue, this acrid flavor of failure. It was the taste of a task abandoned, of a line left unfinished. He sat in this void, the cold now a definitive presence, a weight that pressed down on his shoulders and seeped into the marrow of his bones. The initial, shivering fury had passed, leaving behind a hollowed-out calm, the kind that follows a great storm. His mind, stripped of its visual anchor, drifted back through the years. He thought not of grand theological truths, but of the simple, physical memory of warmth, the heat of the summer sun on the stone of the cloister wall, the steam rising from a bowl of hot pottage on a damp evening, the warmth of his own hands rubbed together briskly on a chilly morning, before the deep cold had set in. These were the true sacraments of his life, the unacknowledged blessings he had taken for granted. His gaze, though seeing nothing, was turned inward, towards the flawed S he had made earlier. In his mind's eye, it was magnified, a grotesque, twisted thing. It was no longer just a mistake, it was a symbol of the body's betrayal, of the world's indifference to the sacred task of the scribe. The perfect, unbroken chain of faithful transcription, stretching back for centuries, had a tiny, broken link, and it was his. Just as this thought threatened to solidify into a permanent despair, a change occurred. It was so gradual he almost missed it. The absolute blackness was softening at its edges. His eyes, starved for light, were pulling it from the void. The frost on the windows, he realized, was not completely opaque. It was a thick, crystalline lace, and through its minuscule interstices, the last of the day's twilight, a mere memory of light, was filtering through. It was not enough to read by, not enough to write by, but it was enough to see the vague, monolithic shapes of the desks, the pale glow of the unfinished page before him. This faint, grey illumination was more merciful than the candlelight had been. It hid the details. It smoothed the rough script into a uniform texture. The flawed S was absorbed back into the collective body of the text, no longer a screaming individual, but a silent part of the whole. The page was flawed, yes, but it was complete. In this gentle gloom, he could accept that. And then, the sound he had been waiting for began. Not the bell for vespers, but a sound that preceded it. The soft, shuffling footsteps of the other brothers, also concluding their work in the darkness. The quiet scuff of a stool being pushed back. The soft thud of a heavy codex being closed. He was not alone in his defeat. All around him, in the deepening twilight, other men were surrendering to the same inevitable close of day. The shared, unspoken fellowship of this moment was a warmth more potent than any fire. He stood, his body protested, stiff and cold, but he ignored it. He did not need light for this final ritual. His hands knew the geometry of his desk. They found the cold, discarded quill and placed it in the bowl for cleaning. They aligned the edge of the parchment with the edge of the desk. They centered the sealed ink pot. It was a benediction performed by touch, a final ordering of his small world before releasing it to the night. As he finished, the bell began to ring. The sound was deep and resonant, vibrating through the stone floor and up through the soles of his feet. It was not a summons to prayer, but an absolution, a release from the day's labors and its failures. It acknowledged the setting of the sun, the failing of the light, the limits of the flesh. He walked towards the door, his footsteps joining the soft, shuffling procession of his brothers. He did not look back at the carol. The page was done. The candle was out. The cold had won the day, but it had not broken him. It had merely reminded him of what he was, a man, frail and temporary, engaged in a work that sought to be eternal. The taste of smoke was still in his mouth, but it was now mingled with the taste of acceptance. He stepped out of the Scriptorium and into the corridor, where the cold was, if anything, even more biting. But it was a different cold now. It was the cold of the world, and he was just passing through it on his way to the next prayer and the fragile, human warmth of the chapel where the candles he knew would be burning bright and strong, holding back the night for just a little while longer. The days that followed the great cold were marked by a subtle but profound shift within Brother Cuthbert. The frantic battle against the elements had subsided into a weary armistice. The cold remained, but a slightly less brutal variety, one that allowed the ink to remain liquid for a full hour before needing warmth. It was in this relative, and likely temporary, peace that a new quietness descended upon him, one different from the focused silence of his work. It was the quietness of convalescence, of a soul inspecting its own frostbite. He found his work slower, more deliberate, but not due to physical impediment. His hand had recovered some of its feeling, the numbness receding to a permanent, background chill in his fingertips. The slowness was born from a new layer of consciousness, as he copied a particularly dry passage from Augustine's Confessions a discussion of the nature of time. His own mind, for the first time in years, began to engage with the concepts, not as theological arguments, but as personal realities. What then is time? Augustine wrote. If no one asks me, I know what it is. If I wish to explain it to him who asks, I do not know. Brother Cuthbert's quill paused after forming the last word of the question. He looked at it. Tempus, time. He He knew what it was. It was the stack of finished pages on the shelf beside him. It was the gradual, inexorable wearing down of a quill. It was the slow creep of stiffness in his joints, a little worse this year than the last. It was the cycle of bells that segmented the darkness into manageable portions. It was a substance he was actively transferring from the future into the past. His pen the valve through which it passed, leaving behind a black residue of words on the pale shore of the present. He dipped his quill and began the answer. Asterisk si nemo ex me queret. SCIO ... double quotes, asterisk, if no one asks me, I know. He wrote the words, and they felt different on the parchment. They felt heavy, as if weighted with his own unspoken agreement. He, too, could not explain it. He could only measure it, one painstaking letter at a time. This new, reflective pace had a curious effect on his script. It became, if anything, more beautiful. The letters were formed with a ponderous, deliberate grace. Each curve was a considered act, each serif a final, thoughtful decision. There was no rush. The deadline was the failing of the light, and the light, he now understood, would always fail. There was no winning the race, only the quality of the stride. One afternoon, the abbot, a quiet, severe man named Paulus, made one of his rare, soundless tours of the Scriptorium. He would glide between the carols, his eyes missing nothing, a drooping candle, a pot of ink left uncovered, a flaw in a brother's attention. He paused behind Brother Cuthbert. Cuthbert felt the presence, a subtle darkening of the air, but he did not look up. His hand continued its slow, measured dance. The abbot watched for a long time, his gaze resting on the newly finished page. He did not speak. He did not need to. Cuthbert could feel the assessment like a cold draft on the back of his neck. He expected a criticism: the work was too slow, the script too ornate for a simple treatise. But the abbot only made a soft, non-committal sound in the back of his throat, a hum that was neither approval nor disapproval. It was the sound of observation, of noting a change. Then he moved on, his shadow detaching itself from Cuthbert's desk and melting back into the gloom of the room. The absence of criticism felt more significant than any praise could have. It was an acknowledgement that Cuthbert had passed into a new phase of his vocation, one beyond mere technical reproof. He was now an elder in the craft, and his struggles were his own. The text before him continued its abstract meditation. Asterisk, the present of things past is memory. The present of things present is sight. The present of things future is expectation. Asterisk, memory. His own memory was not of events, but of textures. The texture of a specific batch of vellum he had worked on 10 years ago, which had been unusually supple. The texture of the pain in his hand on the day of the great cold. Sight. His sight was the word in front of him. The shape of the M in asterisk memoria, asterisk, expectation. His expectation was not for heaven, not for reward, but simply for the completion of the line, the page, the book, for the next meal, for the eventual, inevitable return of spring, which he now allowed himself to envision, not as a certainty, but as a faint, almost heretical hope, the present of a thing future. He finished the page. He laid the quill down. He did not immediately begin the rituals of closure. He simply sat, his hands resting on the closed codex, and looked at the frost on the window. It was less thick today. He could see the blurred, grey shape of the sky behind it. The world was still there. He had not been copying in a void, but in a room, on a planet, in a universe that contained such things as changing seasons. A phrase from the text echoed in his mind, one he had copied without heed weeks ago. Asterisk, my soul is like a house, small and in ruin, whence you may enter and enlarge it. Asterisk, he thought of his own soul. It did not feel enlarged. It felt worn, smooth, like a stone in a river. But perhaps, he considered, that smoothness was a form of enlargement. The sharp edges of ambition, of frustration, of desire, had been rubbed away by the relentless flow of days. What was left was a surface that could better reflect the light, however faint, that filtered through the frosted glass of the world. He stood up, his body aching its familiar anthem of complaints, but the tune felt different today. It was not a cry of protest, but a hymn of endurance. He picked up his quills to clean them, the first action of the evening ritual. The work was not a prison, it was the house, and he was slowly learning to live in it. A new sound entered the symphony of the Scriptorium. It was a slow, rhythmic asterisk drip, drip, drip. asterisk coming from the corner of the room where a patch of sunlight, now holding a whisper of genuine warmth, had fallen upon the frost-rimed stone of the windowsill. The ice was melting. It was not a flood, not a torrent, but a patient, persistent surrender. Each drop that fell and splashed on the stone floor was a tiny hammer blow against the fortress of winter. Brother Cuthbert found his work punctuated by it. Asterisk, scratch, drip, scratch, drip, dot, asterisk. The world was beginning again. The faint, almost imperceptible lessening of the cold had a paradoxical effect on him. It made the remaining chill feel more acute, more personal. When the cold was absolute, it was a universal condition, a fact of existence. Now, it was a localized discomfort, a stubborn guest, overstaying its welcome in his bones. The slight dampness in the air from the melting frost made his joints ache with a new, rheumatic sharpness. He was copying a martyrology, a list of saints, and the gruesome, inventive ways they had met their end. St. Lawrence, grilled alive. St. Sebastian, pierced with arrows. St. Agatha, having her breasts cut off. He copied the Latin words with his usual dispassion. Asterisk igni supercriticulum, tor tur ... Sagittarum ictibus, confassus, est ubera ei abscissa, sunt. Asterisk the horrors were reduced to neat, black script, their visceral terror sanitized by grammar and the gentle curve of a well-formed S. He had copied these stories a dozen times. They were patterns, not narratives. The pain of others was a series of letters to be arranged. But today, the nascent thaw outside seemed to create a thaw within him as well, a crack in his own frozen interior. As he formed the letters for Craticulum, the grill, he did not think of divine glory or eternal reward. He thought, with a sudden, shocking clarity, of the sensation of heat, real, searing, agonizing heat, the opposite of the cold that had so recently threatened to consume him. Which was worse, he wondered, to be burned by the world, or to be slowly erased by it. The martyr was consumed in a single, violent, defining moment. The scribe was consumed in a lifetime of tiny, silent, unremarkable moments. Both, in their own way, were a form of sacrifice. One was a bonfire, the other was a slow-burning candle. He paused, his quill hovering over the parchment. A drop of ink gathered, swelled, and fell, making a small, perfect blot next to the word asterisk, torita asterisk. He is roasted. He looked at the blot. A flaw, another one. But this one felt different from the shaky S born of the cold. This one felt intentional, a mark of his own presence in the text. A tiny, black tear shed for a man dead for 1,000 years. He did not scrape it away. He left it, let it stand as a witness, not to the saint's faith, but to the scribe's fleeting, heretical moment of empathy. The drip from the windowsill continued its slow percussion. It was the sound of time moving forward, of the wheel turning. The frost on the window was now a translucent lace, revealing the blurred grey-green world outside. He could see the dark, skeletal shapes of the trees, and the faintest suggestion of a bud, a mere promise of life held tightly against the branch. It was a sight that stirred something ancient and dormant within him, a feeling so long forgotten he could not even name it. It was not joy, it was not hope, it was simply continuation, the recognition that the story was not over. He returned to his work. The martyrology gave way to a calendar of feast days. The brutal deaths were replaced by the names of apostles and evangelists. The sunbeam on the sill widened, and the dripping sound became a steady, gentle patter. The ice was in full retreat. His hand moved across the page, copying the name asterisk Philippus, asterisk then asterisk Iacobus, asterisk then asterisk Matthias, asterisk. The script was calm, assured. The memory of the great cold was now a part of him, a stratum in his personal geology. The memory of the flawed S and the deliberate blot were also part of the record. His work was no longer a perfect, anonymous transmission. It was a conversation across centuries with the authors he copied, and a conversation with his own, aging, feeling self. The bell for none rang, its tone seeming brighter, clearer, as if the sound waves themselves were less impeded by the cold, dense air. He set his quill down. He looked at his hands, the permanent red callus, the skin etched with fine lines, and the faint blue tracery of veins. They were the hands of an old man, but they had held fast. They had weathered the storm. They had, in their own small, stubborn way, like the ice on the sill, endured. He stood, and for the first time in many weeks, He did not feel the cold as an enemy. He felt it as a condition, a season of the soul that was now, finally, passing. The drip of the water was a liturgy, a prayer of its own. He walked to the window and looked out at the softening world. The page behind him was full. The words, with all their flaws and their perfections, were safe. And for now, in the faint, persistent thaw, that was enough. The scribe had survived the winter. The words would survive the scribe. And the slow, patient drip of the melting ice was the sound of both a ending and a beginning. The drip from the windowsill became the new metronome of his existence. Asterisk drip. Scratch, drip, scratch. Asterisk. It was a slower, more fluid rhythm than the steady beat of his own heart, a sound that seemed to measure the glacier pace of the season's turn. The Scriptorium, once a sealed tomb of cold, was now a liminal space, caught between the receding winter and the not yet arrived spring. A damp chill rose from the stone floor, the kind that clung to the wool of his habit and refused to be warmed away. It was, in its own way, more insidious than the sharp cold had been. His work felt different in this damp air. The parchment, responding to the moisture, had lost its wintry stiffness and become slightly soft, almost supple. His quill no longer scraped. It glided with a hushed, slick sound. But this new ease was deceptive. The softer surface was more prone to absorbing ink, and a moment of hesitation could lead to a blotch, a tiny ink storm that would spread through the fibers of the skin. He had to adjust his pressure, to hold the quill with a lighter, more tentative touch. It was a new negotiation, a fresh dialogue with the materials of his craft. The text was a collection of homilies, simple, straightforward teachings meant for the common folk. The Latin was plainer, the sentences shorter. He found his mind, so long accustomed to the dense, abstract thickets of theology, wandering through these clearings of simple instruction. Asterisk, Beatty mites, quoniam ipsi possidbant, terram. Asterisk, blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. He wrote the words, and his mind, unbidden, presented him with an image not of a heavenly kingdom, but of the waterlogged fields beyond the monastery walls, waiting for the sun to dry them enough for the plough. The meek, the patient, those who waited, they would indeed work that earth. It was a practical, earthly inheritance. A drop of water fell from the sodden hem of his sleeve onto the desk. He watched it bead on the worn wood, a tiny, perfect sphere. He was part of the thaw too. His body, this vessel of bone and sinew, was also responding to the change in the world, leaking, adjusting, complaining in new ways. The dull ache in his joints was a weather vane, pointing towards the dampness. He became aware of the passage of time, not as a sequence of pages, but as a process of erosion. The dripping water was slowly, inexorably, wearing away the stone of the sill. His own life was being worn away by the drip, drip, drip of days. Each line he copied was a grain of sand carried away by the river. He was not building a monument. He was being worn down by one. The thought was not distressing. It was as factual as the grain of the parchment beneath his hand. It was the nature of things. His concentration, that hard-won fortress, showed cracks in this damp, transitional air. He found himself listening, truly listening to the sounds of the monastery coming back to life. The distant, muffled clang of a cowbell from the pasture. The sound of a cartwheel rolling through mud, a thick, sucking sound. These were the sounds of the earth's reawakening, and they called to something ancient within him. A memory of a life before the silence of the Scriptorium, a life of mud and animals and weather. His hand, moving almost of its own accord, faltered. He was writing the word *eternum, eternal. But on the second day, his mind still half in the muddy yard outside, his stroke wavered. The letter was lopsided, its bowl too wide, its top serif clumsy. He stared at it. Another flaw. This one born not of cold or fatigue, but of a simple, human lapse of attention. A moment of listening to the world. He did not reach for his knife. He did not sigh. He simply observed the imperfect letter. It was not a tragedy. It was a record. It was the mark of a Tuesday in early spring, when the drip of water was louder than the voice of Augustine and the promise of a green world. Outside had momentarily outweighed the demands of the eternal one within the vellum. He continued. The homily spoke of the lilies of the field, who toil not, neither do they spin. He copied the words, his hand now steady again. The brief rebellion over the sun outside broke through the clouds for a moment, and a beam of light, weak but unmistakably warm, fell across his page. The deep black of the ink seemed to drink it in, glowing for a fleeting second. The dampness on his sleeve began to steam faintly. The line was finished. The page was nearly complete. The drip from the sill continued, but its rhythm was faster now, less a ponderous beat and more a light, steady patter. The ice was almost gone. He set down his quill. He did not immediately begin his closing rituals. He sat, listening to the sound of water, feeling the faint warmth of the sun on the back of his hand. The meek were inheriting the earth, one muddy, dripping, imperfect moment at a time. And he, Brother Cuthbert, was among them. Not a saint, not a hero, but a man in a damp room, copying words about a beauty he rarely saw, on a page that would outlive him, bearing the quiet, human scars of the day it was made. The fading light was not an end, but a transition. The drip of water was not an annoyance, but a song. And his own, tired heart beat on, a quiet drum in the chest of the world, keeping time. The world beyond the high windows was no longer a study in grey and white. A persistent, greenish hue had seeped into the landscape, a faint blush of life returning to the bare bones of the earth. The dripping from the sill had ceased, replaced by a new sound, the sporadic, cheerful chirping of sparrows who had returned to nest in the cloister eaves. Their calls were sharp, sudden stabs of sound in the Scriptorium's silence, so different from the monotonous scratch of quills. They were sounds of urgency, of life, of procreation. Everything the silent, celibate world of the monastery was not. Brother Cuthbert found his work punctuated by these avian interruptions. His head would lift, almost involuntarily, at a particularly shrill call from just outside. He would see a flash of brown feathers, a blur of motion, and then nothing. The sparrows were creatures of instant, frantic action. They did not measure their lives in pages. They did not preserve words for posterity. They simply lived, loudly and briefly, and then were gone. He was working on a bestiary now, a book of animals both real and imagined. He had just finished a passage on the patient, industrious ant, lauded for its foresight. Now, he was copying the entry for the common sparrow. Asterisk, passer, avis parva, et gregaria, quae, nidificat, intectis, etprieti, bus, ... Asterisk, the sparrow, a small and gregarious bird, which nests in roofs and walls. He wrote the description, his own words describing the very creature whose life was providing the soundtrack to his day. The text went on, as these bestiaries often did, to impart a moral lesson. Asterisk, hec avisticita, in scripturis, esse immunda, et significat, hormens, quiterinus, curis, implicati, ad alta non ev. Asterisk, this bird is said in scripture to be unclean, and signifies men who, entangled in earthly cares, do not fly to higher things. He paused, his quill resting on the edge of the inkpot. He looked from the words on the page to the window, where a sparrow was now perched on the stone ledge, cocking its head, its bright, black eyes seeming to peer into the room. Asterisk, entangled in earthly cares. Asterisk, the sparrow was gathering twigs for its nest, a profoundly earthly care. And he, Brother Cuthbert, was gathering words. Was that so different? Was his own labor the careful selection of a quill, the grinding of pigment, the aching hunch over the desk, not also an entanglement in earthly, physical cares? The aspiration to fly to higher things felt abstract, distant, like a city in a tale told by a traveler. His reality was the weight of the quill, the smell of the ink, the hunger in his belly, and the ache in his back. The sparrow flitted away. He dipped his quill and continued, the irony of the situation settling upon him with a gentle, unburdening weight. He was a sparrow, a small, busy creature, building his nest of words, one twig-like letter at a time. His scriptorium was his eaves, his codex was his brood. The notion that this was somehow a lesser calling than that of the soaring eagle of contemplative prayer suddenly felt like a prideful delusion. Perhaps the sparrow's holiness was in its fidelity to its own nature, to the simple, urgent task of building and sustaining life, however small. This realization did not spark a revolution in his soul. It was more like a slow-dawning grey light after a long night. It did not make the work easier, but it made it more meaningful. Each letter he formed was not just a step towards a heavenly reward. It was a twig in the nest of this day, this hour, this moment. It was itself the prayer. He worked through the morning, the sparrows his companions. Their chirps no longer felt like interruptions, but like a counterpart to his silence, a necessary voice in the chorus of creation. When the bell rang for sext, he rose with a sense of quiet solidarity with all the small, busy things of the earth. The ants in their hills, the bees in their hives, the sparrows in their nests, the scribes at their desks. All were engaged in the sacred work of continuance. The afternoon sun was stronger now. It held a genuine warmth that penetrated the deep chill of the stone. He could feel it on his neck as he worked, a sensation so long absent it was almost shocking. It was a physical blessing, a caress from the turning world. He worked on, the bestiary giving way to a volume of medicinal herbs. He copied the properties of chamomile and comfrey, of sage and thyme. The words were simple, practical, rooted in the earth. Like the sparrows, he wrote of their uses for calming fevers or healing wounds. And he thought, not for the first time, but with a new clarity, that his own work was a kind of medicine, a balm against the fever of forgetting, a poultice for the wounds of time. As the light began to fade, painting the sky in shades of violet and gold, he finished his page. He laid the quill down. The sparrows had fallen silent, tucked away for the night. The silence of the Scriptorium returned, but it was a different silence now. It was not the hollow silence of winter, nor the strained silence of intense focus. It was a full, ripe silence, the silence of a day's work completed, of a small, good thing having been done. It was the silence of the nest after the fledglings have been fed and have settled to sleep. He was a sparrow with a stiff wing, that was all.